So what's going on? How's everything going?
Good, man. Honestly, spent the most time I've spent home in like 3 months over the last few days. So it's nice to be home for like more than 2 days. So it's good.
Nice. So what's the schedule?
Um, right now, we don't have. We're kind of in the Olympic break because our partner is NBC Sports, so they're covering all that. And we race again in Nashville August 8th. So kind of I mean, our last race was July 4th, and there was supposed to be another race in Canada, but Canada obviously is in a tough spot with the whole COVID situation, so they had to cancel that one. But yeah, we're going again on August 8th, so it'll be good.
Do you think the Canadians are overreacting, or it's just worse for them?
I really have no idea. It seems a bit crazy, to be honest, since they're just north of the border, but
I just think the farther north you go, the more intense it gets because of the Canadians we know, it looks pretty crazy. They're like, you can't leave your house, we're going to shoot you.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, no, it's pretty wild. I think Americans are like, one of the definitions of an American is like pride upon freedom. And so, like, that's what makes America great.
Can't break our stride.
No, it's good. Exactly. So, do you guys have any? You guys come out here to Circuit of America, the raceway out here in Austin?
So we don't anymore. No, we had it on the schedule last year, and I'm not really sure what happened to it. I think this year, because it's normally like a March race for us, so they weren't really sure how many tickets they could have sold for this year because of what it was like in March. So they basically didn't run it this year. I don't know if we're going to be back there next year. It just depends on how the track is doing and stuff like that. I'm not really entirely sure what the situation is, but Formula One will be back there this year, which hopefully will be good. And then, yeah, I mean, I like the track. I like COTA. I've raced there a couple times in sports cars and stuff like that. But and I just love Austin as well. I mean, Austin's a great city, tremendous city.
It's a lot of fun. Hey, for the people that don't know you, or more importantly, like know your progression in terms of racing, like where did it all begin? How did it start? Was it like 8 years old, dirt track, go-karts, and then what was the progression?
Yeah, so I started when I was 10. So my dad was a racing driver, raced in Formula One, IndyCar, sports cars. He grew up in Ireland and then came over to America in 1983 to try out the Indy 500, and he never left. He met my mom at the racetrack. She was working there in radio and stuff like that. And so the year I was born, he basically retired. And after that, he went into TV broadcasting. So TV broadcasting was the thing. I was still going to the racetrack all the time. I was at the Indy 500 every year since birth because we were living in Indianapolis. So everything about racing was kind of all I knew growing up, but I didn't know that I could do it. And it wasn't until our neighbor, oddly enough at the time, like asked my dad, hey, like we got a go-kart for our kids. Like, can we like use your help? And he was like, yeah, sure. And he asked me if I wanted to go. And then while I was out there, of course, I was like, hey, can I like give this a shot? And, from then on, it was, that was it. That's really what I wanted to do. And, we were, there's a couple tracks here in Indiana. There was only one when I started go-karting, but then there was like a really nice one that was built like 2 years into kind of when I started go-karting. So, we had some great options here in Indiana to start with. And, as you go, racing is like any other sport, really. If you're going to be a professional basketball player or a professional football player, you're probably going to start when you're quite young. You're going to play in middle school. You're going to play in high school. You're going to play in college. And racing kind of has the same type of progression. There's multiple years that you spend. When I started from age 10, my first professional event, like in the IndyCar, like my first Indy 500, I was 21. So, that's kind of like close to the end of when you're, in your college years. And, up until that point, I'd gone through all the, lower levels of the racing series, won several of those championships kind of along the way, and ended up, at the top, which was really, really cool. So, it's a long road, and it's not a road that's really necessarily like broadcasted. Like we know college basketball, we know high school basketball, we know that stuff, but like racing people, all they see is really what's on television on Sunday. You know what I mean? You got NASCAR, you got IndyCar, and you got Formula One. And, people aren't really familiarized with, unless you go to the events and you see at these events, hey, oh, what are these other cars that are racing here? A little bit smaller, a little bit slower, but still great racing. That's kind of how it all, how it all goes in the progression up the ladder, as they say.
Hey, obviously the difference between, Indy Indy and Formula One, both open wheel cars. What's the difference? I think everybody's familiar with Formula One, but where does Indy necessarily fit into the mix?
Yeah, that's kind of, everyone being familiar with Formula One is something that we're trying to obviously change, because it is very similar. Like we're both open wheel cars. Formula One though is a world championship, so it's McLaren, Mercedes, Ferrari, all these massive high level manufacturers, and they're spending $250 million a year. Our budgets are $6 million a year, so it's a much different arena. And in Formula One, there's about 2 teams that can win. In IndyCar, anyone can win, because we all have the same chassis for competitive reasons. Certain teams can develop certain things within the rules. There are some things that you can spend more money on, which is the diversifying factor in teams and competition. But realistically, Formula One has, I would say, a little bit more power, and they're a little bit lighter, only because they don't race on ovals. We have the most diverse schedule. We race on ovals, like big ovals, short ovals, street courses, and road courses. So our cars have to be built to withstand, impacts of 240 miles an hour. They're not hitting the wall ever at that speed. So we kind of have to have that for safety reasons, which means our car is a little bit heavier to withstand those types of impacts. But top speed wise, we'll go faster than they will. On a road, on our ovals. At Indy, we're doing 240 plus, and in Formula One races, they're not doing that speed. Not even close to that speed. So it's there's a few small differences. They have power steering. We don't. Our cars are much more physically difficult to drive than theirs. They're doing a little bit higher G loads than us because they have more downforce, but that's really only affected for them with the neck and kind of core. But for us, every part of our body is being challenged. So there's a couple of guys from Formula One who just raced there last year who have come to IndyCar, and they're like, this is the hardest thing we've ever done. So there's a few differences. The cars look similar for sure if you put them side by side. Sure. Our competition, I think, is much more difficult and much more intense. But Formula One obviously has the luxury level, the high class experience. Oh my gosh, everyone's so
opulence.
Cool.
Yeah,
they all have Ferraris and drive around on yachts. We don't. We're just American dudes that go to the racetrack and drive faster than anyone else.
Nice.
Sounds pretty awesome.
No, it's I'm a big fan of open wheel racing. But unfortunately, when you turn on the TV, it's always Formula One. If you're gonna
Netflix now.
Well, I search for racing. I'll watch anything. Anytime somebody's going fast, I want to watch it. We were watching drag racing last weekend, and one of the buddy, I was just in Pennsylvania. I was at a conference on national security for the War College, and I went down to PA and visited one of my buddies who, for about the last 18 years, has been he was in the IHRA, which is the naturally aspirated dragsters, and he had the fastest dragster for about 10 years. It's 632 cubic inch motor. But we were watching the big drags, and those guys got those crazy ass roots blowers. They're making 12,000 horsepower out of a 500 cubic inch motor, which is just fucking mind boggling. Nitromethane. It's pretty intense, and flying down. So anything that looks like it's going fast, I'm in. So it's pretty interesting, but there just doesn't seem to, and maybe it's a money thing. There isn't as much coverage unless it's the Indianapolis 500, which people probably look and they're like, oh, Formula One races the Indy 500. So I'm just wondering why the consumer's so uneducated. Is it just a money thing, or are people just not seeing it enough?
There's a long 15-year story about how IndyCar lost the traction that we had in the late 80s and early 90s, because it used to be just IndyCar and Formula One, and Formula One drivers were coming over to compete in IndyCar for the Indy 500 because it's still the biggest event in the world over any other race, over any other event, literally any sport. It's the largest attended sporting event in the world by 6 figures. You know what I mean? So it's still that that level. But there's a wild statistic now in our current era that 96% of the audience that watches the Indianapolis 500 don't know that there's 16 other races in the season. You know what I mean? So it's only because in the mid 90s, the series IndyCar itself split. Powers thought that, one side of the series wanted to go this side, one side of the series wanted to go this way. And it obviously when when one sport splits like that, it kills everything because people want to be entertained and certain fans are tied to certain drivers and certain fans want to support certain people. And there was just a lot of like hatred, like, oh, we hate like those guys, they split it up. So we're only, we're only this side and like, we're only this side. And so that only came back. We only got reunited in 2008. And I always said, because I was just coming up, I won my first car championship in 2008 when the series had just come back together. I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like, this is what we need. And, when the series both reunited, like our TV, like we were still on like Versus, like it wasn't a great like TV package. Like no one was watching Versus. Like you weren't, you're like, it was just.
I don't even know what that is.
Exactly. Like
Poor man's Spike TV.
Is it?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It was like an outdoor network, you know what I mean? And so like, obviously the Indy 500 though, it was still on ABC. It was a network event and that was great, but it really took a while to get things kind of rolling again. And I swear, I said at that time, I said, it's going to take 10 years minimum to get back to where IndyCar is becoming a powerhouse again. And realistically, 2018, you had Formula One drivers coming over again to compete in the Indianapolis 500. You had two-time Formula One world champion Fernando Alonso coming over, the first Formula One driver in a long time, like current Formula One driver, to come over and try out the Indy 500. And he did not win. Like he did not do it. He actually didn't even qualify for the race one year. And I think that really showed people, hey, this is a really competitive series. This is what we need to be paying attention to. And there's obviously, a new network NBC deal that came into play. Things started really going forward. Our ratings were going the right way. Everything was going the right way. Everything's still going the right way now, which is awesome. And, we've got several, Formula One drivers in the field. You've got Marcus Ericsson, Roman Grosjean. You've got 7-time NASCAR champion Jimmy Johnson now in the field, 2-time V8 Supercar champion Scott McLaughlin. Like all the best drivers from around the world are coming to compete in IndyCar. And the fact that more people don't know that is very frustrating, honestly. But as they're starting to realize that, our ratings are continuing to go the right way. So I think right now, everyone just either knows Formula One or NASCAR, and I don't know why. Is it money? Like, is it because F1 has a Netflix series? Absolutely. Like people only know of Formula One in America now because of the Netflix series. That's it. Like I've had so many people like come to me and say, wow, like, is this what you do? And I was like, well, no, but like, it's similar. Like I was a Formula One test driver. Like that picture over my shoulder is like when I was a Formula One test driver. And I was like, yeah, like I've been there before, but IndyCar truly is something that it actually makes me angry that people either are like shutting it out because it's not like NASCAR or Formula One, but like true drivers and like supporters of like motor racing and like competition realize like what we have going on here. And like, we have like our races are not hard to find. They're on Network NBC. You know what I mean? Like on Sunday, Network NBC, like you put up your antennas on your little box here TV, like you're going to find that channel. You know what I mean? So like, it's good, but not all of our races are there yet. So, we've got half the season on Network NBC. And then next year now we have 75% of the season on Network NBC. So nice. It's going the right way, which is great. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely, that's kind of a long story on what IndyCar was, which was the absolute powerhouse, all the big names. Then it split, not great. And then now we're kind of coming back into an era where, I mean, it's the three powerhouses of motorsport: Formula One, IndyCar, and NASCAR.
Are sponsors still involved? I mean, everybody knows F1. I mean, you got these huge mega corporations spending, hundreds of millions of dollars to try to fight out these spots. Is our American car company supporting Indy? I mean, I know that was a big thing back in the day, probably in the 70s, but I don't know necessarily if Ford Motorsports has a Indy program, and if they do, I'm just being ignorant about it.
No, I mean, yeah. So I mean, we have two manufacturers, Chevy and Honda, and they're very, very supportive of the series. They're working on a third engine manufacturer as well, because for us, like our chassis is made by Dallara, so it's all the same chassis. So everyone has the same physical car, and Firestone make the tires, and the engines are different. So you've got half the field with Chevy, half the field with Honda, and I think they're talking to another manufacturer for the next era of engine comes in 2023. So more horsepower, hybrid technology, all that stuff. So that's great. But yeah, I mean, we also, when you look at Formula One, there's 20 cars on the grid, 20, 22, if they're expanding. I don't even know if there's 20. Yeah, there's only 20 right now. And at our next race, we have 28 cars on the road course. So like we have a lot of cars, a lot of teams, Penske, Ganassi, Andretti, McLaren. We have big names, big teams, big sponsors. My sponsor is the U.S. Air Force. We've got, there's companies like DHL, Verizon, PPG. There is a lot of sponsorship support, which is great. But realistically, that is always our goal, is to try to sell. We got to sell. We got to go up against, if we're trying to sell a $6 million budget, well, how are we going to try to justify that up against a company who could potentially put that in the NBA or the NFL? Or like, what's $6 million going to get them in that arena? What's $6 million going to get them on TikTok? You know what I mean? Like, who knows? Like, you're going to pay an influencer.
What the fuck is TikTok?
Exactly. I don't
future.
Oh yeah, no.
Daly, you got to step your game up, bro.
I'm with
what
you.
I've been told.
I had the same conversation that I was on a podcast earlier, and I was watching this thing where I think it was like BD Gridiron was showing different NFL players doing TikTok dances as their end zone dances. I had no idea that there were like named dances that everybody on TikTok, and I just fucking flew over my head, and I was totally fine with it.
Like
I was like, good. I'm glad.
Sprinkler.
I'm glad I don't fucking know this. And a bunch
flossing.
I can't imagine the harassment I would have given a dude in an NFL locker room who was doing TikTok dances. Thank God I was retired when that happened.
I'm completely out on it. I'm like, look, I said one app that I've said I will not download. I was like, you guys do your thing. And then now people are like, well, you're an idiot if you don't have it. And I'm like, okay.
I can't do everything. And
Yeah.
the bandwidth of just like being able to do all this, it's like, oh, well, here, I'm going to put my dances on TikTok, and I'm going to put my pictures on Instagram, and I'm going to, rant for 160 characters on Twitter, and then I'm going to update status on Facebook. Feels like a lot of fucking work.
Well, speaking of work, Conor, is it recommended like UFC, where you got to build your brand outside? You got to start talking some trash. You got to gen up some buzz.
Dude, before you get into that, because that's, I think, where this will go, can you give me some technical specs on the cars,
Okay.
like weight, size, motors? Just educate me. I'm into, I weld and fabricate, and I'm into trucks and motors, and I build cool shit. So I'm always just the technical shit is what I kind of dig on.
For sure, yeah. So we're engine-wise, it's 2.2 liter twin turbo V6, 700 to 750 horsepower, 750 with our, on road courses, we have a boost button for, better racing. So we have the ability to use 50 horsepower extra boost during the race for 200 seconds. So you can either use that to defend or attack. And it's essentially like nitrous, like what you see in Fast and the Furious is very, very accurate. Like it feels like a lot of power. Immediate boost, because with the twin turbo package, it's super easy electronically to just add boost and add power. So the cars weigh 1,600 pounds, so a little bit heavier than a Formula One car would be, but light when it comes to a NASCAR Cup car is almost double, maybe triple that weight. They're
Sure.
probably 3,000 pounds, and yeah, we a lot of aerodynamic grip, several thousand pounds of downforce coming from the wings. And yeah, that's pretty much kind of the general spec.
Do you guys test any? Is it like wind tunnel kind of type of stuff where you guys are constantly working on wings and different pieces to try to create more downforce?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that. Thankfully, though, like that's the good part about IndyCar is the cost limiting. You know what I mean? Like you could spend $100 million a year on the wind tunnel, but there's really no point because the aero package is spec. So everyone has the same aero pieces. Everyone has the same wings. Everyone has the same, wickers you can put on the wings. It's just a matter of how you want to run them. And everyone has a different opinion. And you do go to the wind tunnel to find a few different things, which is, that's all basically most important for the Indy 500. Because the Indy 500 is we're going the fastest. You have to be the most aerodynamic efficient. And if you can find, something very, very small there, it's going to account for something massive in the long run. So that's where all the aerodynamic work is really done for, is because the Indy 500 is our biggest event. It's the biggest prize money. It's the most points. It's the, largest attention. So all the wind tunnel stuff is for that. It's really down to the engine manufacturers as well. The engine manufacturers have a small window to work in, but they're still doing some of the smallest things when it comes to, changing how the tuning of the engine during shifts. How do we work the upshifts to make the most efficient possible? How do we generate boost a little bit quicker but controlled? There's several things on the engine where there's no traction control, there's no limitations of any kind electronically, but Chevy can go in and tune how the boost builds to basically help us with traction. So it's not traction control, but there's a lot of things that they do all the time to work on how do we go faster? Because when we show up in Nashville at our next race, August 8th, we're gonna be looking for tenths of a second. On the Formula One grid, P1 to P20 is probably 3 seconds, 3.5 seconds. For us, P1 to P28 is going to be 1.1 seconds. You know what I mean? So you're looking for the smallest of gaps. And there are usually like 6 to 7 cars when you're like P4 to P10, all within the exact same tenth of a second. So it's very, very, very competitive.
Is the platform of the motors the same? I mean, so like Chevy goes and gets to make their 2.2 twin turbo motor, and then Honda does. I mean, do they have a general spec and then they work within, or are they just like, hey, we're running, I don't know, multiple valves, more cams. I mean, I'm just wondering, is it based on cubic inches and they can design their own, or liters, or then they design their own platform, or does somebody sit down and be like, hey, we're going to standardize the platforms?
Yeah, it's a standard platform. It's pretty well controlled, only because, again, for cost limitation, right? All the adjustments that I'm talking about are very, very small, and it's usually with the electrical tuning of the car, and of the ECU.
So in a sense, and I know this is a terrible analogy, you could say that IndyCar racing is like the stock car of the open wheel kind of market.
I would. Yes, but even in NASCAR, like when you say stock car, like if you look at it again, there's only 2 or 3 teams that are going to win races. You've got guys that are driving around at the back of the field that are 2 to 3 seconds off. You know what I mean? So it's not even like that. I mean, and even those guys, if you truly look into stock car racing and NASCAR racing, I mean, there is so much money being spent on chassis development. Like, yes, the body is a Ford body, or the body is a Chevrolet body, the body is a Toyota. And those guys have developed a ton of aerodynamics in the wind tunnel with their bodies. But realistically, so much of their development comes from the chassis and what they've found in the wind tunnel from the chassis. And so realistically, it's even more competitive and more locked down regulation wise than NASCAR. And that's actually what NASCAR is going to next year with their new car. They're trying to make it more competitive. They're trying to make it more like IndyCar. They've actually got the designer of the IndyCar to make the NASCAR chassis, Dallara. So it's something that is basically what everyone is going to, because we want to see, like, everyone in America wants to see the most competitive stuff out there, right? And if it's not as competitive as it could be, how do we make it more competitive?
Well, there's also a difference. You have to be able to go right and left. They can only go left.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why they probably struggle when they come over. I was wondering if you guys get NASCAR guys. I mean,
Tony Stewart.
Yeah, they can only go left. I mean, he's got to go right and left. I mean, he's they're like ambi turners, like Zoolander.
Yeah, I mean, Tony was one of the best to ever live, for sure, and he could do both. And right now we've got Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson's running full time in IndyCar, and he has really struggled. He is having a very, very difficult time, finding the speed on the road courses. And NASCAR does 2 road courses a year, but they do so many races that they get lost. People don't really realize that they do road course racing, right? But 2 out of 36 races is not a lot. So it's something that I respect the heck out of Jimmy for doing, because he went from being literally the best, the most successful NASCAR driver ever, to coming to IndyCar and almost qualifying last for every race. You know what I mean? So like it's something that is tough, and He's doing a great job trying to learn, but it's, when you're up against, the field that he's up against, it's a challenge without a doubt.
And you dabbled in NASCAR a little bit. What was your perception when you went over there?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it. I've done one Xfinity race and 2 truck races, and I love it. I think it's very, very competitive depending on what car or truck you're in. And if you're in a competitive truck, it's great racing. And I mean, I'll watch NASCAR every weekend. You know what I mean? Like I'll watch the truck races, I'll watch the Xfinity races because I love racing, and I got a lot of friends in the field. You know what I mean? So it's something that for sure, like I love oval racing, and like even though IndyCar and like I was born and bred on road courses. I've really come to like oval racing. And so racing on the oval in the truck has been a lot of fun, and I would love to do more, but it all depends on, what sponsors want to do and what people want to do with me.
Mm. Okay. So building your brand tech. Sorry.
So building,
I got all my motor stuff out of the way.
I'm sure there's more in there.
Well, the only other one, I mean, the only other thing is just I'm amazed, like what's the tire width?
I have no idea.
I mean, because dude, when you watch those things, like, I mean, the tires are so wide. I mean, you're basically like strapped between 4 tires, and you have, like you said, manual steering, and you're just like quick little things. I mean, quick ratio boxes. It's fucking awesome.
Connor, what's your daily driver? Daily, that's a pun.
So
he knows.
No, I drive a Chevy Tahoe from the team, so I don't have anything cool. Drivers used to make a lot of money back in the day, not as much anymore. We're trying to get back to that point where I can get something really cool, but I like my Tahoe.
Well, we're Team Chevy over here as well. So
yeah, we've been one of the kids that works for me. He grew up dirt track racing and was pretty good at dirt track and was getting kind of groomed to go into some NASCAR stuff, and ended up, like, I think it was like in 2008 when all of a sudden the market tanked. He was in this kind of like racing development deal, and then just got out of it and started wiring cars. And he works with Joe Martin, but he's constantly sending me all these ex NASCAR stock cars that are retired on racing junk, and he's like, dude, we need to get one of these chassis and then drop some VIN frame on top and just weld it all up. And he's like, we could go out and drive these on the street. I'm like, I'm in. As long as it looks like really shitty and like multiple colors, like junkyard camo, where the like people like take their children and hold them tight. That's the only way I'll do it. I'm like, it can't look nice. It's got to be ratty. No windshield. We'll fucking go.
I mean, I love that idea. Honestly, I'm all for it. If you need a teammate for that, I'm in.
Well, there's a pretty funny deal, and I forgot what it's called. But it's a drag race. He said it's called like the No Shit Shine race, where you're supposed to spend $500, but you have to drive the car from like a starting point, like 100 miles to the racetrack. So you just can't have some purpose-built deal. And then when you get there, you have to race. And he sent me a link for it, and I was like, man, that is so in. Like, just find some fucking piece of shit $500 car, have to drive it, and then just go drag race the shit out of it. I'd be in.
This is not the Gambler. That's a different race.
No, the Gambler. Those guys are hilarious. Have you ever seen that? Like the Gambler 500?
No. What is that?
These guys, it started up in Oregon as kind of like an interesting kind of like mixing of racing, off-roading, and trash pickup. So the Gamblers' whole deal is like they get pissed off that people camp and fuck up nature with all this, like with trash. So they have these Gambler rallies where these guys will just buy street like normal cars, do a little bit of modification, and then off-road the shit out of them on like legitimate off-road trails, and then go out there and clean up and pick up a bunch of trash, which and it's hilarious. You'll see these dudes just literally just like yard sailing like minivans. And like
jacking up Miatas.
Yeah, like putting the Miatas on 35s and just launching these things, and then the dudes are out there picking up trash. I'm like, it looks like a good time. As long as we could drink some beer and barbecue, I'd be totally in on this.
There you go. I mean, that's a respectful cause too. You're out there cleaning stuff. It sounds great. There's also, I don't know if you guys are interested in this though too. There's basically this there's these 24-hour races that happen called there's the 24 hours of Le Mans in France.
24 hours of lemons.
But then there's the lemons, yeah. Which is,
one of the kids up the street from us that used to come and train, he and his buddies put a car together, and I welded on it. I had to fix some shit. And they took this like piece of shit Ford Taurus out there, and I think they might have actually Aiden.
Yeah.
The kid up the road, yeah.
Well, and Texas Dave.
What's that?
Texas Dave went in on that.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, dude, it's hilarious. I think anything that involves wheels and driving and racing and like something where you get to go out to the track, like I think it's incredible.
Me too. That's why I'm hooked. It's my drug, that's for sure.
Nice.
All right. Building your brand.
Building your brand.
Well, when did you start to see this wave and shift? Were people recommending you start to hone your personality and turn it into your business and brand? Or did you just feel, I'm natural, I'm awesome, everybody follow me?
It's funny, man. I think I'll never forget the very first time like you start to get into race cars from go-karts. I was about 14. And there's lots of racing schools around there where you go to a 3-day class, you get in a very low powered race car, but they teach you kind of the basics of race car driving essentially. And, but they also, it was called the Skip Barber Racing School at the time. And it's still around now. They just kind of revamped it as well. And back when we did that, one of the classes that you took on that 3-day class was like how to talk to media and like how to talk to people and like how to do stuff and not say dumb things, you know what I mean? And so I've never really had an issue talking, but there are a lot of people who do. And like, you definitely have to think about that stuff. And when social media like became a thing, then it was, at first we kind of did it just for fun. And then you realize, well, you have to have all these social media accounts if you're gonna be a driver, only to keep people up to date, like with what's going on, you know what I mean? And then it became something that you sell, you know what I mean? It's like, well, how many followers do you have? And like, well, I mean, I have this many, you know what I mean? And then now it's people are addicted to it. It's like people have jobs. I mean, there are way more 18 to 22-year-olds with Lamborghinis than I've ever seen in my life, you know what I mean? Only because they dance around a little bit and are pretty good at editing on apps, which I respect. I'm like, I wish I would have done that. But I think for me, growing up in racing, like you couldn't really be yourself. You had to be very clean cut. You had to be very, couldn't say anything bad. Thank everyone, blah, 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 blah. Boring. And that was on my road to like Formula One. Because Formula One, if you look at it, really there's not a lot of drivers getting out and punching each other after the races. No one's doing anything like that. It's all very like, oh, well, the team did a great job today. And it's, but it's
yeah,
still,
well, when Ferrari's your sponsor, I mean, like those guys,
yes, but I think now I don't know. There's a whole other way of looking at that. And it's basically like the European arrogance, right? Like for us, they just looked at me as an American when I was over there and they were like, oh, well, you guys aren't meant to be over here anyway. And I was like, well, what are you talking about? Like, we're winning races over here. Me and Alex Rossi, like the only guys in the last decade to win, F3 and F2 races and, drive Formula One cars over there. But still, they're like, yep, nope, you're not qualified. Like, all right, whatever. You know what I mean? And it's a very, very, like, just, there's no fun to be had in racing over there, honestly. Like, unless you make it to Formula One, I'm sure it's great driving. But, like, everyone is just there to critique and criticize, and it's just a really like just disturbing environment, honestly, from what after being in it. But but in America, like people crave entertainment and like people crave excitement, and like if why do you think NASCAR is so successful? It's because some guys get out of their cars and throw stuff at each other, and like if there was a lawn chair on pit lane, someone would pick it up and beat the crap out of someone's legs with it after the race because they were upset at each other. Guess what ends up on SportsCenter? That, you know what I mean? And so that there's a lot of that stuff. Like, I'm not saying that everyone needs to just fight each other, but I'm saying you got to be exciting. Like you got to be, you got to be willing to speak your mind, and you got to be willing to be personable. And I think so many drivers get scared of doing that when they're younger. I can even see it now with the younger drivers that are coming up. Like it's still that, situation where all the team owners in IndyCar right now, and all the team owners in, Formula One, everyone is, older and they're used to, hey, you got to be this way, you got to be that way. But there's, they're slowly starting to understand, hang on a second, if we have people that are, talented drivers, but also quite entertaining and have this, following, maybe it works better for us. And I think we're getting there. But it was something that I definitely fully embraced when I got back to America after Europe. And like, I just wanted to be myself. I wanted to enjoy what I was doing. I wanted to be competitive, which we have been. And I also want to make people laugh, and like I'll do whatever it takes. I'll do anything for an adrenaline rush. I was at Travis Pastrana's house a couple weeks ago, and we jumped a convertible limo with a body of water in the back of it. You know what I mean? And that's going to end up on the internet at some point. Not yet, but I'll do anything, and I like to have a great time doing it. And I think in IndyCar and all across the sporting world in general right now, you got to create content. You got to be, putting stuff out there that people want to watch and want to be a part of.
Would you call yourself the Happy Gilmore of IndyCar?
I don't know about that. I mean, I don't know about that. I would like to maybe think so, but who knows?
Well, we're starting something.
You know what? He just makes a great point. Like, I think in today's access with social media and all this, it's not just enough to do your job. Like, I think before social media and before like this 24-hour news cycle, you could go out and race and maybe they'd write an article about you in the local paper, or I don't know, maybe Sports Illustrated would put something out, and that was really the extent. I mean, now all of a sudden there's Barstool and CBS and NBC, and there's Sports Illustrated. I mean, everybody has these different social media outlets, so they're constantly looking for stories. There's a 24-hour news cycle. People are checking their phones 200 to 400 times a day looking for things. And unfortunately, unless it's somewhat memorable, people just get lost in the shuffle. So I think it feels really fucking disingenuous and overwhelming that you honestly have to just be the turn the heat up on the dancing chicken all the time, or over there at the monkey with the cymbals, where you're like, man, do I have to come on every single day? And it's like, are you not entertained? And I think that's what you run into.
But there's also something as well that I think, another reason why you don't know about IndyCar is because I don't think enough of our drivers work at it enough. You know what I mean? Like, as you guys talked about earlier, it's hard work to keep up with all these apps. Like, you got to do a lot to, put something on Facebook, put something on Instagram, put something on Twitter. You know what I mean? And a lot of these drivers, when you made it back in the day, you didn't have to worry about that stuff. There were people writing about the sport. There were people, taking pictures of you, put them on the internet, whatever. But now a lot of people get their information and news from you directly. And if it's not that exciting, or if it's not that, electrifying, then people are like, well, why am I going to watch this on NBC? You know what I mean? So a lot of our drivers really do have to have to work harder at it. And it's not through any fault of their own, because honestly, it takes already so much time to be focused and be learning and being the best driver that you can be, both physically and mentally. But you gotta either have the right people around you to help you with the social content, or you gotta be willing to put the work in and develop a plan to basically figure out why we don't have 10 million people watching our race every weekend. You know what I mean? And until we get to that point where every driver, at least within their within reason, is is fully engaging with the community and fully engaging on social media, but also, heck, do random TV shows if you want to. I did The Amazing Race. I've done reality television, trying to help IndyCar and trying to do all that stuff. So it will take work, and people have to be willing to do it.
How'd you finish in The Amazing Race?
We finished fourth. We made it all the way to the last episode.
What is The Amazing Race? What is that one?
We can walk the earth, meet people, get in adventures.
Oh, kind of like Kane from Kung Fu?
Uh-huh.
Oh, I like it. Was it rewarding?
Basically 11 teams of 2 that start somewhere, and all you have is a backpack, and you travel around the world for a month. And each leg is it's a race, and a team gets eliminated at the end of each leg. And there are certain prizes along the way, and at the end, the winner gets $1 million. Oh. So it's interesting. I actually watched the show when I was a kid, and they've done 32 seasons, so it's been somewhat successcul.
Oh shit!
Yeah,
I must not be plugged in. I must not watch enough television.
But to be fair, I don't anymore. I don't watch network. I really it's hard to go if it's a Tuesday night at 9 p.m. I'm gonna be on Netflix or something like that. You know what I mean?
No, I'm with you. I mean, Chris loves all the CW shows, so
big Gossip Girl guy.
Yeah.
CW.
My kids are obsessed with all the superhero stuff, the Flash, We watched Green Arrow. We've watched. I mean, like if there's like a CW superhero show, we've watched it, and it's like
Superman and Lois, right?
Oh, they love it, dude. They are, and like the problem is, do you have kids?
Oh no, very very single and very very alone, which is great. Okay. I'm happy.
Fuck you, damn it. Just know when you have kids, you have to basically choose a show that picks to the lowest common denominator. So I got my twin girls are 9, my little boy's 5, and so we have to watch shows that are like okay for the 5-year-old to watch. So I was like, oh, let's watch this Army of the Dead. Like this should be great. And it's like, no, we don't get to watch that. So I pretty much haven't seen anything other than like the most violent we get is like The Flash. And even then, it might be a little. I'm like, this is awful. So I don't even watch TV.
I mean, that's the current area you're living in. You know what I mean? You gotta.
I know, dude. And this guy's over here is like, I'm single, alone, and happy, and I can watch
jumping
whatever
convertibles.
Shows. I can watch whatever shows I want. I can watch Army of the Dead.
Conor, you mentioned top of your mental and physical game. Let's get into some preparation, physical preparation, and then get into the mental side of things. Walk us through workout routine, training that you're currently doing.
Yeah, so I think the most interesting part about racing is I think it's the most highly underrated physical sport out there. I know back in the day, like my dad, when he raced in Formula One, there wasn't a lot of technology to track, physical data, in the late 70s, early 80s, right? And they had, my dad actually had at the time a heart rate monitor attached to him for one of like the Formula One races. And the doctors at the time had like looked at that data and they were like, this is ridiculous. This is insane. There's no way like it's, this high for this long. And I still think to this day, there's like a fact that, for a sustained amount of distance, only competitive cyclists like in the Tour de France have as high of a sustained heart rate for as long of a period of time. And, I wear this Whoop wristband now, oddly enough, that like tracks my heart rate during every race because it's very easy to wear. Like it, some people like it, some people don't, but a lot of the drivers actually wear them now, and it's pretty accurate for in the race for some reason, and it's very very easy to wear for us. So like I've been tracking races now for 2 years, and it is wild the amount of data. Every time I put the screenshot of what my heart rate was during the race the entire time. I mean, you're at maximum attack. You're at your highest heart rate zone for 3 hours. You know what I mean? During the Indianapolis 500.
So for those of you listening, it's usually 220 minus your age. How old are you?
I'm 29.
So he's 29. 220 minus that would be 191. So you're basically 190 for 2 hours straight.
We are. I mean, I could even show you. It's 170 to mid 180s for the whole race essentially. So it's very very high level, and it's something that, again, we don't have power steering, right? So when you get in your car and you're turning the wheel, like, it's very very simple. Power steering, Formula One power steering, NASCAR power steering, IndyCar no. And it's also now it's about 145 degrees in the cockpit. So we're losing. I've lost up to 16 pounds after a race, of water weight because of how hot it is in the car. So a lot of us train like triathletes essentially, but with a lot more strength involved, high intensity circuit training, a lot of stuff that we've developed purely for kind of driving where there's a steering wheel type situation that you're also being pulled on with an iron neck situation because you're working your neck muscles, you're working your core, everything at the same time, because everything is being pulled on at the same time. And even your legs, we're hitting the brake pedal with 1400 psi of pressure hundreds of times during the race. There's just so much going on physically, and then also a massively high level of information that you got to process mentally, communicate with your team, figure out what's going on in the car, make some adjustments in the car if you need them. So there's stuff that people don't really think about, because when you see us on the track, it's like, all right, well, they're just, they're driving, they're doing their thing. But when you actually look at the data and see things like that, we had a doubleheader, race in Detroit this year, and Detroit's a very, very difficult physical street circuit, very, very hot. Driver, like we were, like it's insane hot. And when I look at both of those days combined, that's a 9,000 calorie 2-day situation. I mean, it's like you're burning 9,000 calories over 2 days, which is pretty solid, I feel like. And it's something that after one race, it's like, all right, well, we got another one on Sunday. So get an IV, like get all sorted out, try to figure out, how to prepare your body again for another battle. Honestly, it is like a battle. I always compare it to like a true fight that your body is going through every race. And it's like really satisfying to make to the end, honestly. And so, I have a trainer here in Indianapolis that I've trained with for a long time, St. Vincent Sports Performance. They've worked with a lot of the Olympic athletes, a lot of, NFL guys, NBA, a bunch of people you see in there all the time, which is really, really cool. And they work with a lot of different drivers. And, it's really 2 times a day, every day. I was there for an hour and a half this morning at the gym, and I'll ride my bike probably for another hour and a half, 2 hours this afternoon after this. So it's something that you really, really got to stay up on. And this year, especially, for some reason, this year has definitely been the hardest year physically to drive the cars because of some of the additions to the car safety wise, a little bit of added extra weight on the chassis itself. So there's a lot that people just don't understand until you paint the picture for them. And it's something where, like, you can't go out on the interstate and drive 200 miles an hour or 180 miles an hour without power steering. You just can't do it. I can go outside and throw a football and know that I'm not going to play in the NFL. And I know that I'm not going to be able to take a hit from a 300-pound human being and not break all of my limbs in my body. You know what I mean? So, like, it's something that I always tell people, if you can go indoor go-kart racing, it's a very, very, very simple. Go to K1, go to, any place that has indoor go-karts that are, 30, 40 miles an hour. Do 10 minutes in one of those things because they don't have power steering. And if you're somewhat fast in one of those, you're going to start to sweat and you'll be like, oh man, like I'm breathing hard. Like what's going on here? And I was like, take that times 1,000 and then you'll kind of realize maybe a little bit of like what's going on.
I was wondering if any of our listeners have ever owned or driven a car that had manual steering.
Yeah, I mean, that's tough.
Right here.
Not a lot.
Right here. I have a 49 Mercury that I used to drive with the 3 on the tree and the flatty with manual brakes and manual steering.
Mine's just out.
Well,
an 86 Chevy K30.
Yeah, you got to put fucking fluid in the steering reservoir, and it's like I'm seeing him cranking it. And he's like, "It's not working." I'm like, "Well, your
My
reservoir's
heart rate's
empty."
jacked.
Yeah,
60
He's like,
miles an hour.
I'm working on my forearms. So what about food? Like, what about like obviously you're just going through liquid and probably just expenditure, but like, how is the food? Are you able to eat during that? Or are they giving you some goos, gels? I don't know, something.
So during the race, we have nothing. So, I on race weekends, like I have type 1 diabetes as well. So it's a little bit of a different, different situation for me. But I always keep everything the same on the weekends, like pasta, vegetables. Like I don't eat meat at the moment. I only eat fish. I kind of like I've been rolling towards the pescatarian thing for some reason. I was vegan for a little while. Decided I like sushi sometimes, so I went for it. And yeah, so like I keep it pretty simple. But during the race, yes, all you have in the car for 2 to 3 hours is a drink bottle. And, for me, that has to be like a little bit, some sugar, some water, like, just because of the diabetes thing. If I need sugar, boom, there we go. We get some Gatorade in there, whatever it is. But yeah, there's nothing that you have, the only rest periods that we have during the race are the 7-second pit stops that we have, you know what I mean? And sometimes there's 2 stops, sometimes there's, 3 stops. At the Indy 500, it's our longest race. There's 6 pit stops. But yeah, realistically, there's no way to refuel your body while you're in the race.
So how do you manage the insulin for like the, like the fasting piece of it? Like do you use like a long acting insulin for like that bolus and then you kind of like dose on the other side of it? Or like, what is the, do you, because I'm sure what do you use? Is it like a long acting, short acting, medium acting? Like how do you like, give me your strategy. I'm a little curious on that.
Yeah, so I have a long acting and obviously a fast acting insulin as well. And for me, it's actually pretty simple. And everyone's body's different, but it's all about preparation for me. I monitor my blood sugar in the car with a CGM, a constant glucose monitoring system. So like I see where it's going, but I'm convinced adrenaline cures all problems in your body. I'm convinced during a race I don't have diabetes because my body's working so hard to prevent me from dying in other ways that it's like the diabetes thing is actually not too difficult to worry about. If I know where I'm at before the race, I know exactly where I'm going to be after the race. And I don't know if that's the same way for everyone else. But for me, I'm super, super, like I wouldn't say like, I guess dedicated. Yeah. But like, I just pay attention to it. Like I'm not someone who like messes around with like, oh, it's going to be fine. Like I pay attention to it all the time. It's on my phone right there before the race. Know where I'm at. I have Gatorades at the car and I have water in the car. If I need, sugar, we go to Gatorades. If I don't, water, it's fine. So, so for me, it's just all about preparing the days before, the hours before, and I always eat the same meals before the race all the time, and I usually always eat them, the same amount of time before the race too.
So it's just a little bit of game planning. Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, on your social, you're very active. Like I'm checking out some of your photos here in your IndyCar that says "Tired of Pricks." So, and you put together some race for some type 1 diabetic children, man. So what's the fight there for your desire to give back?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the diabetes journey has been really interesting for me. At first, it was something that no one ever talked about when I was growing up. Like I got diagnosed when I was 14, and I had never heard of anyone else with diabetes. I didn't even know what diabetes was.
What was the mechanism for it? Did you get sick or just randomly? I mean,
so I lost a ton of weight and was like just thirsty all the time, and like it was just
ketoacidosis.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was something that it was like, I didn't get sick, but I was just like, oh, this is weird. You know what I mean?
Was there something leading up to it? Did I mean, I've read everything from like stress to to illness to, I mean, like it's pretty interesting when you look at the different mechanisms because they're kind of all over the spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I haven't really been asked that before. I don't know. Like I don't really know. My dad's convinced the flu shot gave me diabetes, but like I also have no idea if that's true or not. But it's one of those things that just kind of happen. We have no family history of it either, so I think it was just kind of one of those random roll the dice, sorry you're screwed type of thing. But it didn't really bother me at first. I was like, all right, whatever. We were racing the next weekend. As soon as I was out of the hospital for 2 days, like we're at the go-kart track the next weekend. I had all the tools I needed. I had the medicine, whatever, and I said, all right, here we go. So so it was something that like I guess it all depends on your mindset, right? Like if you're willing to understand what it takes to live with it, then you can. You really do have the tools to live with it. Is life more complicated? Absolutely. But you don't not have the ability to do it. It's just convincing yourself in your brain that you just have to do this to live. And like you can live a normal life. You can eat what you want essentially, as long as you're, giving the right amount of insulin for it. But I obviously try to eat healthier because it's much easier when you eat healthier than when you don't. I can't just hammer.
Yeah, dude, it's like the numbers are pretty interesting with like the just background. My little boy got diagnosed with type 1 about 4 months ago.
Okay,
so he's 5 years old. So, dude, we've been in this fight for about 4 months, and it's pretty interesting. As I was pouring through all the research, the people that follow like the ADA standard recommendations run into some serious problems because they're in this constant deal. But I also wonder if like people are mismanaging it and like, hey, like I'm gonna go out and eat pizza, but then I got to jack myself with 18 IUs of Humalog, and it's just like, I mean, so we've been managing it pretty well for him with just a low carb diet to the point where he hasn't even taken insulin in about 4 weeks.
See, that was what I was told still isn't good. Like I was told like if you can, if you eat like just purely vegetables or low carb and stuff like that, like I was told your body still needs insulin to function. So like have some Gatorade and give some insulin for that. But again, like I think there's a ton of people, especially, and on the internet now you can find 100 different ways to do things. Right. So like it's interesting. And I would say for me, for sure, personally, I discover, over the years, I have figured out, okay, my doctor wants me to do this, but my body, reacts this way. And it really is more of like a game of just adjusting as you go, right? Like I know what insulin does to me. I know how much of what insulin will do, you know what I mean? And if there's needs to be more insulin, like I'm not afraid to use it because realistically you have the insulin there. And if you're eating something and you're afraid to give more insulin, well, that shouldn't be the way it is because your blood sugar will just go high, right? So like, I think the best addition for me, honestly, has been, the CGM, the constant glucose monitoring system. That's been, I use a Dexcom G6 and that thing is, I couldn't live without it nowadays. It's always on my phone. Like, and you as a parent, you could always have it on your phone. Dude, my little boy got it from day one. I wear one too. So,
just because I was curious to know how my blood sugar lined up, and then I could eat things and see how they responded. And it was pretty interesting. Like I figured out that like, stuff like just basically like some berberine or even just a few different supplements, like I can try to spike my blood sugar. And if I'll take like some berberine or alpha lipoic acid or some other stuff, dude, it like tanks me. Especially if I take it with like B vitamins. So I just started kind of playing with it, and I'm like, I wonder if I could like how high I could spike myself. I wonder like if I could take something, and so I just started kind of plotting it. But for him, he's pretty good, man. Like his blood sugar is somewhere consistently between 84 and like 103, 110, 121, and then he actually, when he eats, he comes down himself. So when he got diagnosed, he was in ketoacidosis and like lost a bunch of weight, and you're like, oh shit, this is either cancer or diabetes. Thank God it was diabetes. But when we got him out, we got him a glucose meter, and when all the tests came back, his body was still producing insulin, but out of the 4 markers, only 2 were positive and one of them was borderline. So they were like, well, his beta cells are still working, so he's still producing it. He's just having trouble controlling, but eventually those will die. And I remember thinking like, well, wait a minute, why? And the doctors were like, well, we don't know why. And I'm like, so wait a minute, like, if you go read about this, the ancient Greeks talked about diabetes. They called it like wasting disease, and people would just die in like a pool of their own sugar pee. And like, I'm like reading all this historical stuff. I'm like, so we've known about this for thousands of years, and you guys still don't understand the mechanism. So I dug in, read a ton, but like it's pretty interesting with like the fasting, like the basal bolus, using like Levemir and the long acting to kind of make sure that he's, when he's not eating, he's normal, and if he comes up and if he needs it. But for the most part, he's been managing it pretty well, but he never really ate carbs anyway. He was just not really a big carb eater.
Yeah. And I mean, I wasn't either. Like I was trying to be a race car driver. So like I was at the gym. Like I had a trainer when I was 12, I mean, that's way before I got diabetes, and we were trying to, eat healthy, do all this stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's something that like, everyone deals with it differently for sure. And I agree with you completely. I'm like, how have we not figured this out yet? I'm not really sure. But yeah, I mean, there's been so much more that's like, the car that you talked about, Are You Tired of Pricks, right? Like our partner there, like Mankind, they have been so great on, coming up with new ideas, new therapies. And I mean, I use Afrezza myself, and it's inhalable insulin, right? And for me, like, it's been the best thing ever because it's the fastest acting insulin in the world. And like, for me, I just carry around my little inhaler with my pods of insulin, and anytime I need it, it works in like 10 minutes, and it's like, boom, right away. And so like, that's something for me that has like changed my life for sure. I have my 24-hour acting insulin as well, but that's something that I think, like, if I would have thought of that, like if I would have known that I wouldn't have had to give, 6-8 shots, whatever a day, when I was like 16 or 18, I wouldn't have, I was like, oh, I'll do anything, for that. But, it's still fairly new. It's obviously like, they're going to hopefully have it for kids in the next year or two, which would be awesome. Because I think it's been great for me. And, it's something that, I'm learning more about every day. Like even me, like I've had diabetes for so long now, but it's something that every person's journey is different. And I wish, it was easier, but I mean, I'm still having a great time with life, honestly, doing whatever I want to do, training hard, partying hard as well. And, and it all works.
So you're over there doing the math. You're like, all right, if I know there's X amount of carbs and this many beers, how much do I have to pre? And then you like start timing it up. But at least that's the way I was thinking about it. I was like, I wonder if you got to actually figure this equation out.
No, I don't do numbers anymore. I don't do math. I know, like me personally, like I know what's going to affect me, and I know what's not. And like I know if I go out and have, pizza, it's the worst, right? Like I know that pizza is going to take a lot of insulin right up front, and you're going to need some more, a little bit later too, and it's going to last a little bit longer. But realistically, for me, I've not asked for a number of carbs in anything in 10 years. You know what I mean? Because
so, like, what do you do? Do you just look at it, the number where it's like, hey, I know like this dose drops me this much, so then if I'm here, this is kind of how I calculate it?
Exactly. Yeah, because I mean, unless something's hiding in a meal, you know what I mean? It's all, a lot of it's pretty much the same. You know what I mean? If you're going to have fries with your salmon or whatever you're like, fries are going to do a certain amount to your body. You know what I mean? And like, for me, when I look at my CGM and this, like the insulin that I use, this is my insulin right here. I have it in my little bag, but like
looks like a vape. It's really just
exactly. Yeah. A little vape thing. Yeah. And, for me, I don't like, I have a number that like, okay, per this many carbs, it's 1 unit of insulin, right? Or 1 unit of insulin. And I'm like, okay, I have that in the back of my head, but like, it's not that hard. Like like food, like it's that, yes, every food is different and everything that you eat is going to be a little bit different when it comes to carbs and all like that. But realistically, you have the tools. Like I have the tools to adjust for it. You know what I mean? And I don't know, I've been, maybe my body is a little bit different and there's a little bit more consistency in there, but like I've tuned up how my 24-hour insulin works. Like I've either used more of that to make it more steady throughout the day for my fast acting. I'm like an engineer with this whole diabetes thing. Cause like I try to figure out how to be a better driver. Well, I also want to try and figure out how to make diabetes easier. So I think everyone's different. And I wouldn't necessarily say that like I would have the best way encouraged by a doctor to live life. But like, I tell you what, I don't have any problems.
What's your target number are you shooting for?
I mean, 80 to 110. Like that's where we're living. You know what I mean? And I'll probably be on the lower end of that too. Most of the time around like 60 to 75. But for me, that's kind of where I like to be at. I'd say 60, 65 is a little too low, but I'm not necessarily in peril when I'm that low. So, I think even up to 150, it's now you're getting a little bit high, but my A1C is like 6.7. So like it's pretty solid for what it is for an adult. And so I'm not necessarily too upset about it.
Yeah, for those of you guys listening, if you get your A1C done, anything over 5.7 is considered diabetic, and then anything leading up to it they call pre-diabetic, unless you're diabetic, and then it's a little bit different. Like my little boy's pretty much consistently been like 5'4".
Yeah, it's great.
But he, it's really pretty interesting because the way that you're doing it is the way that I did it, or at least I do for him. All we did was figure out like, hey, this is how many points Humalog pulls him down. And like the Levemir, which is the long acting, this is what it kind of does. And then we just basically do the equation. I'm like, well, if he ate and he's at 120, does he come down naturally? And we kind of wait. And if he doesn't, then you hit him with a little bit, he comes down, and then you try to level him out. And I'll give him like a little bit in the morning to kind of stabilize him over the course of the day, and sometimes a little bit before bedtime. And then we just kind of play with it. But, as long as I just monitor it. But he's also 5 and weighs, 55 pounds, 54 pounds. So, like, 30 grams of carbohydrates, which people would freak out at, for him is like one of his cookie bars or a granola bar or whatever he has. Yeah. And so it's just kind of different. Whereas you talk to adults, the one that kind of tripped me out was when we were in the hospital, they were recommending that he should have 50 grams of carbohydrates per meal. And I was like, that's a ton. And I even said to him, like, dude, he doesn't eat 50 grams of carbohydrates in a day. And the lady's like, no, you got to dose him. And I'm like, dude, there is, like, I'm telling you, like, here's his standard diet. I'm not going to change his diet to this super high carb diet. I'm going to find a way to work with whatever he wants to eat. Give me a number. And they were like, couldn't give me a number. So I just picked 84. I was like, 84 is his number. That's what I'm going to try to get his number to. Standard deviations. And we use this thing, I think it's called like not Sugar Mama, but it's like an app that kind of is able to kind of calculate this stuff in real time. And he's just super receptive to it. Like we'll get up and like calibrate his Dexcom every day, and he pricks his finger and knows how to do it, and he's super involved. But he's a sharp little kid, man. And I think like you said, if you can figure out a system for you to manage it, and you can continue to train and be active. But we're here in Texas, so it's fucking hot as shit. So I know when he goes out and plays, like we played in the pool and it was super hot the other day, and man, he spiked. He was like at 150. So I was like, we gotta get out of the pool, cool down a little bit, and I'll give you a little bit more. Yeah,
I mean, it will get harder. I can promise you that, because like I remember like when I first got diagnosed as well, like your body changes, right? And like it's it will get harder, and I do I think everyone's got their way of handling it, but like that's a strong, like what you're doing is definitely awesome. I mean, like that's to start out that I can't even imagine having diabetes that young. So like when I was 14, like I was like I knew what was going on. I knew what was happening, but I was also very 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 independent. So I didn't want any help with it. You know what I mean? And so, now as adults, 6 to 7 is where my doctor's like, yeah, 6 to 7 A1C, that's your living life fine. So if you're in the 5s, yeah, that's even better. But yeah.
Did you have a bunch of issues I keep reading about as kids go through puberty, all of a sudden it's like trying to hit a moving target a lot of times, and they were talking about hormones and as this affects. So I try to for the last 4 months, man, I think I've read just about everything I could on this, just because he's 5 years old, so trying to sit down and explain this to him, we went out for sushi last night, and I was getting him hand rolls without the rice, because I was like, man, white rice is the biggest spiker on glycemic index. He'd be 300 by the time we left that place. So getting him to do hand rolls without rice, and trying to I got hand rolls too. And so what I'll do is I'll be like, hey, if you don't get carbs, I don't get carbs. Whatever you eat, I'll eat. And we just kind of tag team it. And I'm like, it's fine. I'm like, at this point in my age, I'm not crying about not having carbohydrates that often. I'm like, whatever you get, I'm like, that's what I get. So, and then we got the glucose meter. So we're like, dude, we wear them too. Here they are. And so this idea of oh, well, dad does it too. It's okay then, has been a big thing for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I think that's awesome. I never really had anyone like that. So I only ever knew one, when I went to high school, I only knew one other person in my high school with diabetes, and she did a terrible job. She was taken to the hospital twice in high school because her blood sugar was soaring through the roof. And I'm like, well, what are you doing? I feel like we have the same thing, and I am okay. And it just depends on how you do it. It just depends on how you mentally approach it. And I talk to kids all the time, and I'm like, you know what? You can do whatever you want in your life, because you really can. But it's going to take a little bit of work. But if you're prepared to do that work, then you know what? There's nothing that's going to stop you. So it's something that I'm glad that he's got you for sure, because that's awesome. I think having that type of teamwork, right, is going to make it seem much more normal, much more easy. And a lot of the times that's what kids want to feel is hey, I'm not this. I'm not this outcast of hey, I've got this weird disease. It's no, we're all just still people. You know what I mean?
When we went to his last endo appointment, there was another girl, probably about maybe younger, 3 years old. The mom showed up pulling her in one of those foldable wagons that you take to the airport. The little girl was so heavy she couldn't walk.
Yikes.
And so the mom was heavy too. So she wheels her in. And we see them go in, and so we were talking to the doctor later, and he was like, well, this is great. He's doing fine. He looks super fit. Went through everything, and we were talking about his diet, and he's like, well, on contrast, I have a child in the other room who only wants to eat, basically cookies and this, and we're just trying to manage whatever she wants to eat. And I was like, you mean the little girl? And he's like, yeah, she's packed on a lot of weight. She's not moving very well. And I'm like, holy shit, where's that intervention where it's you know what, there's a different way to attack this thing, and just allowing a 3-year-old to select whatever they want and then just dosing with high amounts of insulin seems insane to me.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. It's something that, I had to completely eliminate a lot of stuff from my diet. Did I enjoy an occasional cookie? Yes, absolutely. Pizza is my favorite food. I live across the street from the best pizza place in our city, literally across the street. And I was like, look, I'm limiting myself to going to this place once a month at maximum. You know what I mean? And I'll only have a couple slices of pizza, right? I'm like, all right, look, I know what I'm going here. But even if I do, I make sure that I've ridden 40 miles on my bike just before that. You know what I mean? It's something that it's all an equation for me, as you mentioned. I'm boom, workout. All right, perfect. That's great. Do salads all day, right? Right now I'm only eating salads because I had a pretty aggressive summer break. Our last race was July 4th. Had a good couple weeks and enjoying life a little bit, and now I'm all right, we're back to the grind for the next 2 weeks leading up to the race. So it's all that stuff is just kind of an equation for me. And once you get back to oddly enough, when you're working hard and you're putting in a ton of effort and you're training and and focusing on drinking water instead of beer, you know what I mean? It's amazing how much easier it is to manage your blood sugar. If you're just eating terrible things all the time, well, diabetes becomes much harder.
Sure. Well, and also non-mediated glucose uptake, which is as you exercise, the body creates some really bitchin' pathways, and all of a sudden that actually lowers your blood sugar. So like having like a big aerobic base and doing aerobic exercise, I mean, it's pretty interesting. I have a assault bike in our house, and I've actually like eaten something I knew was going to spike me, and then like looked at it and then jumped on the bike, and within 20 minutes I can get it right back to where I want. So that's like the age old, like after dinner, go for a walk, do something aerobic. I mean, you know, it's basically the Thanksgiving rule. If you stuff yourself
Thanksgiving rule. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, like that's part of our deal. Like on Thanksgiving, we always have to go out. We always would have to go for like a 20-minute walk after Thanksgiving. And I asked my mom why, and she's like, because you guys would go fall asleep on the couch, you lazy fucks.
Yeah, walk after your nap or no?
Yeah, exactly, before. She's like, you're going to eat that much food, you got to go walk around the block a few times. And I always could just call it the Thanksgiving rule, and then I figured it out, or I learned about it in physiology and was like, God damn, my mom was smart. She had to talk shit to us about it all the time. But yeah, it's really been interesting as a parent for it, because especially with like the internet, I can't even imagine like pre-internet where people would have got their information. But it's really pretty fascinating how like there's different camps and thought processes on this. And the endo we go to is really good. It's like whatever your child, like within reason, but like what is your child going to eat? And if that's what they want, and I'm like, he likes a high protein diet, he doesn't like a ton of carbs, and he likes salads. And they're like, great, feed him exactly that, and then just kind of dose appendantly, and you'll figure it out. The worst though is laying in bed, and then like all of a sudden like the alarm will go off on the Dexcom, and you could be at like 74 at like 2 a.m, and you're like, oh, and you're like watching it fall, and you're like, all right, get up, we got to, you know, it's Smarties or maple syrup. I mean, trying to get him back in, and it's like this constant game, because at the end of the day, he's 5. He doesn't know what the hell's going on. He's just like knows his thing is beeping, and mommy and daddy are waking him up, jamming something down his throat, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I upstairs in my bedroom, got the little nightstand there. First drawer is Skittles, Airheads, and basically any type of candy, because like realistically, the most difficult thing for me sometimes is going low at night, right? And so like if if I hear the alarm, for sure, it's like, all right, here we go, gonna need some of this stuff, to help out, which is fine. But that's, again, although it sounds weird, like candy's a tool to help, right? Like it's not something that you eat all the time. Like you're gonna need it. Like you're gonna need those sugary things sometimes, and like I don't eat candy ever, but the only time I do, like I need it. You know what I mean? So it's something that you just have to be ready for, and you can do it however, you can do it multiple different ways. But yeah, I think I understand the being low at night thing, definitely, for sure.
Yeah, that's yeah. And then like of course and then like you give it and it kind of keeps trailing it, and you're like, oh, please come back up. And then like, I got the glucagon pen, and you're like, man, I don't want to jack him with this thing. And then he'll come back up. So it's been interesting. When you're in the car, man, and you're 2 hours in the fight and it's 145 degrees, what does the blood sugar look like? Is it higher on the level, and it's like the body fighting for homeostasis, or what does it look like?
So like and by the way, I've never used one of those glucagon pens, so don't worry. I think it's.
We have it. We've never used it, but like they like that's like the break glass fucking emergency is the glucagon pen.
Yeah, that's a real tough spot, and I've even been so low sometimes where like, I've been in and out and like still haven't used it yet. So that is a really tough spot to be in. So don't worry. Hopefully you won't have to use that. I haven't used it in however many years, 15 years. So don't worry. But yeah, it's during the race. I mean, as you said, during workouts, like high aerobic level workouts, like your blood sugar will go down. And if anything, I'm not worried if my blood sugar is 250 at the end of the race. I don't really care, because it's not affecting my performance at all. And right after the race, I've got my insulin anyway. And if it's in no astronomical reason would it ever go higher than that, because you're not ingesting any carbs. You know what I mean? You're not, my drink bottle in the car is only, half Gatorade, half water anyway. So if for some reason my blood sugar is going a little bit lower, like there's enough Gatorade in there to help kind of correct it the other way. But for the most part, it's a very, very straight line. If I'm starting the race at 90, it could be 90 to 95 the entire way through. Until like, if you're in a super hot environment, like I'm going to drink what's in the drink bottle no matter what, if we get a shot, you know what I mean? But then again, I'm not worried about it going high. The only part where you really start getting affected is if it starts to go low. And like the main thing that I've ever experienced when it starts to go a little bit slow in the car is you start to lose feeling in your hands. And so like you can still control everything, but you start just losing feeling in your hands, and it's kind of like, this isn't ideal. You know what I mean? But I still think your body is producing enough adrenaline that it's everything at such a high level. So it's something that I have not struggled with. And there have been some races where, I finished at 200, but there's also most races where I finished at 120. You know what I mean? And it's easy. The only thing that gets annoying afterwards, though, is that you've lost all the water in your body. So your blood sugar will start to go up pretty easily afterwards because you've just lost all the fluid in your body. And there's been some times as well, like I remember last year at the race in Iowa, I'd qualified on pole. We had one of our best weekends, like great races, but it was a doubleheader because in the 2020 season we were, they were doing a lot of doubleheaders because a lot of our events were canceled because of COVID and whatever. So, and Iowa is a short oval, 7/8 of a mile, 5 Gs every corner, laps for 17 seconds. You're doing an average of 186 miles an hour in a 7/8 of a mile oval. Physically the most difficult track on the schedule. And, we're doing 2 races, 2 full distance races, and they're 2 hours each. And so after the first race, I'm like, that was wild, crazy. Like it went well, whatever, we're done. Get an IV, hydrate. I had all these hydration plans, noon tablets, bottles of water, all this stuff, everything mixed together, all this stuff. And after race 2, we were pushing so hard to try and win the second race on a different strategy. So the last 50 laps of the race, I was doing qualifying laps. I was giving it absolutely everything in my entire body. And when I got out, I passed out of the car. Like I passed out for like 10, 15 seconds, like just kind of like out. And then I went to the, care center afterwards. I was like, all right, get some water in me. I'd lost everything in my body. But again, my blood sugar was like 125. You know what I mean? No issue with the blood sugar, just your body was pushed beyond its limit of physical capability. And, I couldn't move for the next 45 minutes without cramping in my body. I had to wrap my entire body in ice just to get to the plane, just to move. And that was definitely the furthest I've been physically. But again, my blood sugar that entire time was never above 150, 175. So like it's not like the high blood sugar was inducing that. It's just the amount that we are pushing in these cars, pushing our body to the absolute limit.
What's the reasoning behind the manual steering? Is it just because that's always how it's been and it's just kind of one of the features in the Ironman kind of nature of it?
Yeah, it's different, but also it's a weight thing. If you add a power steering system to the car, it's another 30 pounds potentially. So 15 to 30 pounds. So right now our cars are already too heavy, and we don't really want to add any more weight. So it's kind of always the way it's been. It's kind of been the separating factor for us as well, between Formula One and NASCAR, and it's kind of cool.
What's the size of the driver? Like, how tall are you? What's the weight? Is that average for every other racer?
So it's a wide variety of drivers. Like I'm 5'9" and 3/4, and I'm 180 pounds. So there's only 5 drivers that are probably heavier than me, but the lightest driver is probably 140 pounds. You know what I mean? Maybe even less. You got these really small dudes who are just kind of born that way. You got Takuma Sato, 2-time Indy 500 champion. I mean, that guy is all of 5'4", maybe 5'5", and maybe 125 pounds, 130 pounds. But I still don't know physically how those guys do it. But obviously, everyone's different. Everyone has a way they train differently, and sometimes there are different ways in the car that we can make the cars a little bit physically easier to drive, whether it's caster in the steering or physically a bigger steering wheel. I know Takuma Sato uses the biggest steering wheel that you can use, for leverage.
More leverage. Yeah, more leverage.
Yeah, there you go. Nailed it. So there's a wide variety of guys. I think like the tallest guy is Graham Rahal. He might be 6'2", 6'3", and that's pretty tall. Like you're not going to be much taller than that and fit in a car. And Graham is also the heaviest. Like Graham is probably 25 pounds over the weight limit, but he still does really well with it. Like he's won races, he does things, but he's not going to get much lighter. Like he's just a big dude. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was fortunate to do all of the Richard Petty NASCAR experiences when we were in the NFL. So we had a deal with NASCAR, and so we got to do it in Irwindale. We went to we went like Kansas City. I think it was. We did like 4 or 5 tracks, and it was awesome. Just trying to fucking do the Lambada to get in there. You're like squeezing in there, and I'm just under 6'6". So like trying to get in there, and I remember the first time we jumped in, they like we go through the safety brief, and I'm like, I'm gonna fucking ride this dude's ass to try to get him to go as fast as I can. And then all he did was just slow down. So then you got to like wave off and play their little game to try to like. I almost wanted to like pass him on the outside and see if I could just fucking light it up. But we ended up going pretty fast, man. It was a lot of fun. I loved it.
Yeah, I mean those experiences are awesome. Like that's what I always tell you. I was like, if you have a chance to do that, do it. Like it's cool. Like it really is. Like it really is different than what you're doing every day on the roads. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The other one we did was the Bob Bonner Racing School on the Corvettes. That was bitching. Like that was there was a lot of like technical driving stuff in terms of like diving into corners and like where to accelerate. Just like really good information in terms of like if you're going to drive a high performance car. And then when I was living in Florida, I had a really pretty bitchin' Porsche, and I was part of the Porsche club, and we used to be able to go out to Sebring Raceway and go out there and run the cars. So it was
that's
it
awesome.
was fun. Yeah, no, I love it. I love every ounce of racing. So I mean, and any race we can go to. So it's super cool.
Well, I promise you, if you want to come to an IndyCar race, let us know sometime. And also, it's on TV. So if you want to give it a watch at some point, August 8th, the next one, it's going to be a good one. And
where you guys August 8th?
So we're in Nashville. So it's a new venue for us. We've never raced there. It's a street course. So it's in the streets of Nashville. I think it's the first ever racetrack that goes over a body of water. We're going over the bridge in like the Cumberland Bridge or whatever in Nashville. So the track kind of goes around Titan Stadium, over the bridge, across the water, a couple turns, and then back across the bridge. So it's a pretty cool track, it looks like, and it's gonna be awesome. So it'll be Sunday, August 8th. I think it's on Network. I think it's Network NBC. It's either NBC or NBCSN.
What's your favorite track? I mean, are you oval, road course? Like, what's your favorite?
It's tough, man. I love Indy. Like, I love the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Driving at the absolute limit on that track, for the Indianapolis 500 is incredible. But when it comes to like road and street courses, I mean, we've got some great tracks, and we've got Mid Ohio road course in Ohio. I love the Long Beach Grand Prix, the street circuit in Long Beach. There's almost really no tracks that I don't like, oddly enough. So, and I've been very lucky to, have been on a lot of tracks around the world as well. And I still think in America we have some incredible racing circuits.
All right, final questions over here. Racing movies.
Oh, of course.
What's your tops? Don't limit it to one.
I mean, look, it's tough because I think Too Fast, Too Furious is a racing movie. So
what else would it be?
It's a documentary.
Yeah, we like to call them
Exactly.
The Fast and Furious documentaries.
Ask me what my top 3 favorite movies are. It's Too Fast, Too Furious, The Fast and the Furious, and Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. No big deal.
I think Tokyo Drift's number 1. I think it's the best one.
See, I love it. I think it gets disrespected too much.
The fact that kid's driving that badass Monte Carlo, dude, that Monte Carlo speaks to every bit of my white trashness. When I saw that thing, I was like, man, a flat primered Monte Carlo. This
is our guy.
Nice. Yeah. Oh yeah. That's totally our guy.
Yeah. I mean, other than that, I mean, when it comes to comedic racing films, Talladega Nights, there's really nothing like it. I love it. I think it's a great film. There's a movie called Driven, which is
with Stallone.
Stallone wrote it.
I've seen it. It's one of my favorites.
It is a wildly out of control film, but it is awesome. And my dad trained Sylvester for that movie. So like, that was pretty hilarious. He's got photos on the wall of him, him and freaking Stallone, and he's got my dad in a headlock and all that stuff. So that's pretty hilarious.
Who's taller, Stallone or your dad?
I think they were pretty close. They were similar.
What about Days of Thunder?
So Days of Thunder, again, I was about to roll to that. That's on HBO lately as well. I've been putting it on the TV. Love a bit of Days of Thunder. mainly because of the cast. Cast is just strong.
It's so quotable. Tires cold
yeah.
in races. Oh yeah, there's so many. Yeah.
But more recently, have you guys seen Rush?
Yes.
Rush, great movie, and that was my dad's era of Formula One as well. So like, my dad doesn't go to the movies, but he went to that movie with me, and he's like, yeah, I mean, honestly, it's pretty accurate of how what was going on, how it was. Like, Peter Hunt, the accountant and manager of James Hunt in that movie, was my dad's accountant as well. And like, he was like, yep, that was kind of like how Peter was. Like, I was like, I thought that was really, really cool.
Did you see Ford versus Ferrari?
I did, yes. And I thought it was a great film because, again, great cast. But because I'm a racing driver, I hated the way that story plays out for Ken Miles, because like, that would so happen to me. Like, you win Le Mans, but then it gets taken away. And like, it's something that makes me so angry as a driver, because racing can be so political and so annoying sometimes, and people just wouldn't know it. I can't watch it because it makes me angry. Like, it's a great movie, but like, just because I'm in racing, like, I just hate to see the result of it.
Dude, the part where Shelby gets in there with Henry Ford Jr. and he just fucking is literally just balls to the wall, and he's over there crying hysterically, and it's like, my daddy would have loved to have been here. Like, was so telling of Henry Ford Jr. And dude, I loved it. I've seen that movie. I've watched it a bunch of times, but I also grew up in the South Bay. I grew up in Southern California, and Carol Shelby's son lived up the street from us. So we would see and then Mike McCluskey, who's like the foremost Shelby restoration guy, his shop is down at Torrance Airport. So when I was a kid, we used to ride our bikes down to this general store and buy candy, and they had magazines, and his shop was right around the corner. So we used to always see these and like it, if you're like a boy, and I don't mean in this time but like little boys and loud, incredible looking cars. Like I tell people all the time, like, I'm not a Ferrari fan, but a front engine V12 Ferrari driving by, I can hear it in the distance and know what it is, and I'll stop and like pay homage. Seeing like original Cobras, 427, 289, whatever it is, but the big nasty Cobras, like there's nothing like that. And even as a little kid, seeing them go by, we would just stop and be like, so it's even to this day when I see it,
Yeah, I mean, we're car guys, right? Like, anytime you see something like that, I agree. Like, just yesterday or 2 days ago in Indianapolis, like, I mean, this is a little bit more current, but like, Indianapolis, not a big city. We're not LA. We're not Chicago. We're not Miami. But a white Lamborghini Aventador rolled down the streets of downtown Indianapolis, and like, everyone on the street like froze, and even me, I was like, what is this doing here? I was like, no way. I was like, oh my gosh, where did it come from? You know what I mean? It's like you just saw like a dinosaur that had just been revived, and it's walking down the street. It's like, I just love cars. Like, you love seeing things like that.
Dude, I saw one yesterday that was highlighter green, like the brightest highlighter green, and I saw it coming this way, and as soon as I saw it, I was like rolled my windows down and like took my foot off the accelerator so I could hear it go by, and I was like, oh my God. And I'm not necessarily a Lamborghini fan, and I'm mad at them because I'll never fit in a Lamborghini. I played with some dudes that had Lambos, and like, I couldn't even like think my way into the passenger seat. I'm like, fucking Italian shitheads. I can't even get in this thing.
That is tough for you, and I feel bad because I'm just thankful to not have to deal with that. Even though I feel like climbing in my IndyCar every single time, I'm like, gosh, I wish I was smaller.
Yeah. Do you if you had the opportunity, let's say like, somebody pulls up and is like, hey, do you want to take my Lamborghini, Aventador for a spin? You think you could probably get them to pull a Henry Ford Jr. and cry in their pants?
I think I would surprise people. I think it's very easy to take people beyond their limit of what they think is possible in a car. But I honestly, when it comes to road cars, I'm not really super confident in road cars, like, only because when I've been to like a track day, right, and you go out there and like, I did this track day event at Laguna Seca not too long ago, end of last year, and there are a lot of guys out there with some great Porsches.
Beautiful place. Like, if
exactly.
anybody's ever been there, like, it's in Monterey. Laguna Seca is the most beautiful place on the planet.
We race there end of September. If anyone wants to come out, going to be a great event.
Nice.
But yeah, I drove this guy's car and his Lamborghini, and like, it does take time to get used to those cars. Like, I'm not going to be the guy who, goes out and immediately is at 10 tenths in someone else's car or something else like that, because like, I don't have to. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not proving anything to this guy or anyone out there at this track day that like, hey, I need to go, balls to the wall in this car that could potentially fail because he's been driving it around like a stooge for, hours. But yeah, I think there are a lot of people that are driving that like at first, like if I drive in their car, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm driving faster than this guy. But that's because they're at 12 tenths, right? And I'm at like 7 tenths. Like, I'll drive it maybe just as fast as them, maybe a hair slower, but I'm also completely within control. Whereas I'll never forget this guy with his Porsche at this event. He crashed it and like 3 times. And we had told the guy, we were like, look, man, you don't need to go that fast. Like, you don't need to be flat, full throttle in this corner. Like, I told him, I was like, look, man, I can promise you right now, I'm not even flat in an IndyCar in that corner. I was like, I don't know what you're trying to do here. And every single time he spun the thing and then backed it into a wall. And I was like, we told you to go slower. Like, all you got to do is just do that. Like, but some people just, they can't process it. And it's one of those things that like, that's why a lot of these like expensive cars that you see crashed, it's because people just have not been to that limit of control of a vehicle, and vehicles are hard to drive at the absolute limit. You know what I mean?
No, I'm with you.
Well, that was their Indy 500. Try to freaking show off.
I always think if you drive the car to the racetrack, like I think about this because I work on, or we build like I'm building a rock crawler right now in my shop, and if we're gonna drive it to the trail, I need to be able to drive it back to the trail. Now, if I tow it to the trail or put it on a trailer, then we can fucking yard sale it. But I think a lot of times these guys are like driving this to the track day. I'm like, well, if you're driving it here, then obviously you gotta probably drive it home. Now, if you're gonna trailer it or put it in your big enclosed deal, then you know what? Then feel free to fucking rack it up. But yeah, no, I've seen some amazing cars. I mean, Paul Walker, class example. Yep. I mean, split that what was it, a Porsche Carrera GT in half, and the guy driving it was a race car driver.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the, well, sort of a race car. That was such a sad situation for sure. But like, again, there is no point in trying to prove something like that on the road. But like, again, people feel the need to do it because, again, when you think about it, there's 7 billion people in the world, and there are only 33 of us that show up every year at the Indy 500 that are getting to push cars to the absolute, limit at that level. So I know that a lot of people that want to do that. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, you guys, like you said, 280 miles an hour on the street. I mean, I bet you the amount of people that have gone, excess of, 150, 160, you could probably, you start cutting them way, way, way down.
Yeah. I mean, it's wild to think of the cars that are for sale right now. Some they're like, what's the top speed? 275 miles an hour. You're like, oh, well, that's the most insane thing I've ever heard of. You know what I mean? Like all these
what's because I remember my Porsche basically governed at it defueled I think at 184, and I was on Alligator Alley coming from Miami in Florida, and I basically lit it up and was like, I'm gonna pin this thing, and basically was at that 184 for over an hour.
That's impressive.
Dude, yeah. I was like, you know what? Like the car actually drove better, I thought, at faster speeds.
Well, you're producing downforce at that speed, so downforce is grip.
I got home quick. But yeah, I saw just this weekend, I saw a 2021 Corvette that was tearing up, and we live on kind of a windy road that people like on Sundays to drive. I saw some guy driving like an idiot in a Corvette. So I mean, there's a reason that those things get split in half. It's usually some old man trying to relive his glory and fucking put it into the wall.
Yeah. I've seen too many terrible things like that. It brings back like all these memories. I'm like, look, guys, you just don't have to do that. I was like, it's not worth it. I promise. Like, because I can't wait to own a nice car someday. Like, one of my goals in life is to own a cool supercar. I'm like, guess what? The one thing I'm probably not going to do with it is drive it like an idiot and super, super fast on the street.
What do you have, like, if you could sum it up, do you have one story, like one racing story, like like either win or loss or something that kind of sums up your career? I mean, you've raced in so many races and been over this, but is there like one story that sticks out that, you get invited to give a toast or come talk at a Rotary Club, for example, and you got to like be able to tell one racing story? Do you have that one canned racing story that you tell?
I don't really know. I think the story of my career has been, I always tell people I'm going to write a book, because there are certain events that you just kind of can't really understand. And like, I'm like, what, like, and a lot of it is, like there's a hashtag that goes around that's bad luck Conor. And honestly, like that, it's a true thing. Like it's something that, I'm very lucky to be where I'm at. Like I'm very lucky to have made it as far as I have, for sure. And like, I won a lot of races to get up to this point, and championships as well. But there's been, many scenarios in my career that I just kind of look back on and you're just like, how in the world has this happened? You know what I mean? Or like, why? And honestly, I think something that I would now say is probably the top one is from the Indianapolis 500 this year. I mean, the Indianapolis 500 is obviously, it's my home race. I'm an Indianapolis native, and it's our biggest event in the world. And it's, it's an event that, my sponsor, the U.S. Air Force, Memorial Day weekend. It's a massive, massive event. And this year was our best race by far going. I led the most laps of the race this year. When we took the lead for the very first time, it was the first time I had led the Indianapolis 500. I've led plenty of other races before, been on the podium in IndyCar races before. But this was the biggest. And, seeing the crowd afterwards, obviously, like I didn't see it during the race, but, a lot of the videos, I still get emotional looking at them to this day, because this is the coolest thing ever. I mean, it's the Indy 500. We led the most laps. We were in a position to win the race. And another car had crashed. And as we were navigating through that debris field, the tire that had flown off of his car had flown through the air and landed directly on my nose cone as we were going by.
Damn.
And that ruined our race right then and there. And it's something that is so random that you never understand how in the world that happens. But it's one of those things that it wasn't damaged enough to change it. And it wasn't damaged enough to where we were sure if it was going to, be okay or not. So you end up in one of those situations where, we went from potentially winning the Indianapolis 500, the biggest race in the world, to having something like that taken away right then and there through something completely out of our control. And, it was still one of the most fun weekends of my life, still the best race of my life. But like, there's just so many funny stories that I will tell some people of like, well, guess what? We were living this race and suddenly we ran out of fuel, or like we did this, and it was like, so there's just a lot of interesting things that, I can laugh about now, because honestly, when events like that happen that are out of your control, you can't do anything about it. And like, I see a sports psychologist as well on the regular, because of, I think the mental side of racing is so interesting. In basketball, football, your performance personally is all that counts, right? If you're fitter than anyone else, if you're doing things better than anyone else, like, you're going to be recognized. In racing, you could be the best driver on that grid. You could be having your best day ever. And there are so many things that are outside of your control that could happen, whether it's, an engine failure, a piece on the car breaking, a very, very small piece, a bad pit stop, a random, someone else crashed that ruined your strategy in the race. You know what I mean? There's so many things that can take away your day, that I think people just don't realize how mentally tough that can be sometimes. Because if you keep showing up and performing at the best of your ability, but you don't have the trophies to show for it, right? You're like, well, how is this, how is this happening? You know what I mean? So I think that's kind of an interesting lesson that I've learned. And I definitely feel like I've gone through a lot to have kind of put me on this, put me where I'm at now, which I feel pretty good about. And that's, that's good.
So overcoming adversity when you have zero control over the adversity that's overcoming at you. Well, fair enough. Nice.
Yeah.
So if people want to catch up with you and they want to follow you, I know I will. Where do they find you on social media?
So on Twitter and Instagram, I'm at Conor Daly 22. One N, like Conor McGregor, but not as Irish and not as rich, and ALY. So that's Twitter and Instagram. I use mainly those the most. I have a Facebook page as well, but I don't really like Facebook, so I don't really use it as much. But I'm on there. It's a verified account, so you'll find it if you just type in my name.
Yeah, what's your TikTok?
Too much people complaining about every time I turn on Facebook or click on Facebook, it's people arguing about COVID and the vaccines.
Yep,
it's like I don't click on any of this stuff, and I'm like, so like I'm always like, is it the algorithm that's showing me this? Because when my wife's like, every time I go on Facebook, I see like, cat memes and cats playing with yarn. And I'm like, all I see is people arguing about the vaccine and COVID. And she's like, I don't know what you're clicking on. I'm like, I click on nothing.
So much anger. That's it. Yeah. And I'm on Twitch. Big streamer on Twitch. I love to stream. Twitch.tv/ConorDaly22. Great place to play video games and try to build a community.
Do you have a website? Is there a ConorDaly22.com?
Nope. Websites are dead. Actually, I do. I mean, I have ConorDaly.net, but it's currently under reconstruction.
It's good somebody owns ConorDaly.com.
Well,
we know him, but he won't sell it to us. So
that's weak sauce.
Yeah, you need to go over there and put a fucking punchify his face.
I agree.
You know where that comes from?
Grandma's boy.
Hey, what do you?
Is it?
No, it should be
punch size your face for free. That's Super Troopers.
It's Super Troopers, dude. How'd you miss that one? That's another great car movie.
Nailed it.
Super Troopers.
Yeah. Cool, man, dude. Awesome time. I'm definitely tuning in. You want a fan over here?
Yeah, me too.
And yeah, hopefully we'll get the wings of Power Athlete Nation behind you, and you get a little extra buzz and get our good karma. We've got some champions in our past.
Yeah, that's great.
I appreciate that. No, it's been awesome talking with you guys.
Well, yeah, thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule of riding your bike and eating fish and vegetables and pizza and whatever else you do. So
video games
on Twitch. So well, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Power Athlete Radio.
Bye.